talk about an overview, then just like the rest of this week, just kind of so you know what's coming down the pipeline. So on Wednesday, we'll have a quiz over annealing, stamping, and roller printing. Okay, so that's over the information we went over last class. Okay, so there's additional stuff, right, we covered. If you need a review, there are actually videos on As You Learn. Some of you are shaking your head. You've seen those maybe? So there are videos on there, and Carly, you watched them. So they're not the best. They're okay. They're from the pandemic, and so I had them, and I thought, well, let's go ahead and throw them in there. So there might be some subtle differences if I talk about something that's due or something, but since they're not current, but there are videos of stuff. So hopefully they're not too boring. Okay. So if you need a review over any of that stuff we talked about, it's all on As You Learn as a video. Okay. Now, we will have another quiz over etching, but that'll be on Monday. So a week from today, we'll have a quiz over what we're talking about today and the next class. Okay, I'm going to split our demo up into 2 days. Usually I pack a whole nother like etching demo and all this stuff into like one day. I'm going to kind of discouple it or decouple it just so that we have some time to digest, and you have some time to hopefully stamp and roller print today if you brought in materials. How many people brought in materials to roller print? Good, awesome. Okay, that's what you're supposed to do. So again, just make sure that you take good notes today, and then I'm going to give you another assignment, kind of just like for things that we're preparing for another set of samples. Okay. All right, before we do that, I want to talk just a little bit about our steps in finishing our stamping and roller printing samples, right? We're going to have 1 stamping, 3 roller prints. So in class last time, I went through, I demoed how to do that, and I want to show you what you're going to do with your samples. So I'm going to take, I think we did this one, and we did this one. So your first step, right, in preparing the sample for finishing, so we're talking right here, this is all the finishing stuff right here. Okay, so everything from, so you need to make sure that you are aware of what we need to do for these 4 samples, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is if we get the piece off the rolling mill, right, it's going to be curved. So we're going to come over to the anvil, and we're going to take a rawhide mallet, and we're going to hammer this down. Now, I didn't mention, I think I forgot last class, we have different rawhides. These that have the green in there, right, I didn't mention that, right? These that are green on the ends have lead inside of them. So they are super heavy, okay? And they really like pack a punch, okay? And so we're going to take our sample, and a lot of you are going to stand here and just kind of not hang on because you're afraid of hitting your fingers, right? Well, then it's going to cause this piece to bounce everywhere, okay? So all you need to do is just hold on to one corner, and you don't have to like smack the whole thing. We can just kind of work our way around, and we can flatten. And then we'll flip it over, we'll do the same thing. Now if you want to use the bigger one, just watch your fingers, okay? Because it will have a larger surface area. And what I'm listening for here to make sure it's flat is, earlier when I had this on here, hear that tap, 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 tap. There's like an air gap there. So I'm trying to hammer the air gap, the metal down so that air gap goes away. And then when I tap it, a little bounce to that, right? There might just be some inconsistencies in our anvil. See how dead that sounds? It's real dull sounding. That's what we want, okay? Now, once we have that, let me do my other one quick over here. The other thing a lot of students do is they choke up on the hammer, or like that. You want to hang on to the hammer mallet back here and let it just kind of drop. You know, you want the weight of this to be able to leverage to be able to work. Okay. All right. Now, once you have that, you'll notice my pieces have a lot of tarnish on them just from sitting. See that kind of splotchiness? That's from the oils, from my fingers. So the next step is that you need to square the pieces up. So that means that we need to come back and draw new lines because the pieces got stretched. Okay, so I'm going to start with one side and trim off just a tiny little, like, it's kind of bowed, you know? And then I'll use that edge, that line, as a guide to cut 2 inches. So I'm actually right on the money right there. So I'm just barely going to trim anything off of this. I might be a little under, okay? If, somebody asked last time, Oliver, was it you that asked about, like, accuracy, how accurate, or?
Yes.
Yeah. And, I want it to be close, as close as you can get it, right? I remember asking my professor, is this square enough? And that term is really funny in some way. He laughed. He's like, is square enough? It's like, it's either square or it's not, And again, like, we want it as good as you can get it, okay? I'd like it to be square, if possible. But yeah, there's no such thing as square enough, right? All right, let's see. I'm going to pick the best edge here. That looks pretty straight. Let's use my straight edge to see how straight we are. Yeah, that's okay. Yep, good there. Good there. Square up this edge. Now I can come over to the stomp shear, and I can stomp shear these samples. And I'm just gonna, line up my line like we did last time. And we're gonna be trimming just a tiny little bit, off of most of these. So it's gonna be fairly easy to do. Square these up. And you might say, why in the world does this matter? Well, first of all, it's extra practice using a stomp shear. Second of all, I used to give students what are called slide protectors. Back in the day, like when I was applying for jobs, when I first started teaching, you submitted a portfolio and you actually used 2x2 slides of your work, your images of your work. So I would give students these slide protectors and they could slide these samples down in these slide protectors and they put it in a free binder and it would protect the samples, and it was a way to put that and include that in your notebook. So that's why it's kind of a holdover from that. You couldn't do that if you could find slide protectors anymore. They're kind of hard to find. So that's what we want, okay? Now, the next step is that we want to apply a patina. And again, you're going to do this for all your samples. You're going to need to do this for your stamping sample, okay? So note that you need to square it up as well, right? And then we're going to apply what's called a patina. Okay, now patina is basically a coating or finish that you put on a piece of metal to kind of give it its final finish, okay? If we don't put a patina on these copper pieces, they're gonna tarnish, they're gonna look really gross, okay? I mean, they'll kind of get a natural patina over time from tarnish, but we actually wanna help kind of accelerate that and have control of that patina, right? So we're gonna apply a patina that is called liver of sulfur. Okay, this is one of many, many, many patinas. I can show you. There is those of you who get, some of you might go down a rabbit hole with this. Let's see. Can I find it? Not in there? Is there no? Oh. Don't see it. Well, anyway, normally, it must be disappeared. Somebody may have checked it out. But basically, I have a book that is just full of patinas, and what it is, it's like a giant recipe book. You get in that, you open up the book, and there's these like color charts that show you all these different metals, and then all these different colors, and then there are chemical recipes that you would mix up for each color that you want. Now, it's not a one-to-one thing on all the patinas. Sometimes you don't know what you're going to get. It's going to be based on conditions. You can get conditions of humidity, all different sorts of things. But the most basic patina that I want you to learn in this course is liver of sulfur. It's a good patina just for general use. It's easy to mix up, it's easy to dispose of, and it gives you really nice finish. Okay? Now, write in your notes, anytime we apply a patina to metal, it must be super clean. That's why I put clean, clean, clean. Okay? Absolutely clean. What does that mean? Well, when we wind up getting this wet, we want to make sure that the water sheets across it. If it doesn't sheet across it, we know that there's oil present. There's either oils from our fingers, there's, tarnish. So we need to clean these super, super well. So our first step is going to be to come over to the sink. And I'm just going to use a Scotch-Brite pen. You could use a number of different things. You could use pumice. This is actually powder pumice that we can sprinkle out. So like you get a hand cleaner, it's got this grit in it. We've got that just straight. It's just straight pumice that you can put in there. And you would just sprinkle it on, and you can scrub it with a toothbrush. I'll do one so you can see. So I'll usually dampen this a little bit. So one method is to use pumice. I will say for samples, we start going through this pretty heavily if we do that. I want to dampen my toothbrush a little bit. And basically I can scrub this really, really well. And you can see we're starting to remove that tarnish that's coming off there, okay? So that's one thing we do. Personally, I feel that a fresh Scotch-Brite pen is way faster, okay? So I'm just going to dampen this, just lay it in the sink, and I'm going to scrub it one direction, and I'm going to flip the piece and scrub it the other direction. So I kind of cross-hatch the piece, okay? And again, I just have enough water on here just to kind of let me get it damp to help the cleaning action. And I'm trying to get down into all the crevices of the texture. And I'm even going to do the flip side, because I want the back to look good too. This is something I would like you to write down too. In jewelry and metalsmithing, the back should look just as good as the front, okay? I've had students that have former students, alumni, email me after the fact, they're like, thank you so much for stressing how important it is that the back look just as good as the front. Now on a sample, probably not a huge issue, right? But we want to get in good practice. It's interesting, I'm always amazed when students make a piece and they're like, well, it's just the back, it doesn't really matter. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It does matter, right? If you make a pair of earrings, and they're dangling, you're seeing the front and the back, If you wear a brooch, yeah, maybe the back won't be seen, but the wearer sees it when they put it on, right? So keep that in mind, okay? See how clean that looks? If we don't get this clean, the patina will be splotchy, and that's what I'm looking for when I grade. If the patina is really splotchy, and it's not consistent, you're going to hear me talk a lot about consistency in this class. A consistency of the finishing of a piece. That's usually my number one complaint with a foundation student, is that like they aren't thinking a lot of times about getting a consistent finish on something, right? Okay, so that looks clean. And one way you can tell this is if you run water across this and it sheets across, it forms a meniscus over the whole surface, you know there's no oil on it. Okay? If there was like a little bare spot, you'd know that there was something on it. Alright, now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab a container out of here, okay? And we're just looking for this could be a Rubbermaid container, it could be, in this case, glass, right? But it could be a plastic container. Liver sulfur will not eat through the container. It's not acidic, okay? Now, the first thing that we always do when we mix up a chemical is we put a piece of tape on the container to label it. Alright, so I'm going to write on here, make a note of this, okay? We're going to write on that label, liver, sulfur. And I'm going to put the date. Today is, what is it, the 23rd? Thank you. And I'm going to put my name. Alright, that way if we need to know who mixed it, we'll put Frankie F. Okay? Alright, this assures us that when it comes time to dispose of this, we know the proper container to put it in. As I mentioned, our disposal is in here. Okay? So I can basically come over here and I can pull out the correct labeled container and I can dump it in here. Now, we'll mix up liver sulfur. It'll probably stay good for most of the day. Okay? If it sits overnight, it usually goes bad. But at least tomorrow when I come in, I'll know to put it in here. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters because one time when I was first teaching, I went to dispose of a chemical and I thought it was an etching solution called ferric chloride. The student left it out. And I grabbed my ferric chloride container out of there. Luckily, I suited up with face shield, rubber gloves, rubber apron. And I opened up that carboy and I started taking my container, I started dumping it in. I have funnels here. Big funnels. Right? We even label those, right? And so I started dumping those in. And immediately I realized there was a problem because that container started to foam inside. You ever done a Mentos yeah, you've done that. You know what it does, right? It was like that. All of a sudden, that stuff started growing, and it then started shooting out of the container, and it was like, it looked like it was expanding foam, okay? It's going everywhere. Luckily, I mean, I got it on my face shield, I had it on my apron, it was everywhere, all over the floor, stained the floor. This is my old school. So, it was awful, and I'm so glad that I had all that safety equipment on. But it could have been, you know, not happen basically, right? Had I had a student label things, right? And so I got a little lax and a little lazy, right? And didn't realize. So make sure that when you mix up something, any chemical, any secondary container needs to have a label on it so we know what it is. Okay? Everybody cool with that? Okay. Alright, now liver sulfur usually is stored in this blue cabinet over the corner. We have a lot of chemicals in that blue cabinet, okay? And this is usually on the top shelf in there, okay? Now a couple things about liver sulfur. When you go to open this up, I just usually take a piece of metal and pop it in here. Some people use their key ring or their key, whatever. Now, we open this up and there's these little green chips. And if you didn't have a mask on, you'd notice all of a sudden, you may have noticed it, there's this odor. It smells really, really like rotten eggs, okay? It's sickening, especially in the morning, okay? So this smells awful, all right? Now, two things about this container. One, you'll notice it's opaque, okay? It's opaque because liver sulfur is light sensitive. You might want to write that down. Liver sulfur is light sensitive, so it will break down as when it's exposed to light, okay? The other thing that will ruin liver sulfur is moisture, okay? So, what are the two tips? Keep the lid on it, all right? Pop it off, get out what you need, and then put the lid back on, okay? And then the second thing is, don't let this container get wet inside. No moisture can contact. And even the smallest amount of moisture can ruin this whole batch of liver sulfur. And we only need a couple little slivers of that, okay? Maybe even one little chunk. So don't reach in here with wet tongs, okay? And I wouldn't handle this with your hands just because your hands will reek for a long time, all right? So I'm gonna grab a pair of tongs, and again, I usually like dry these off to make sure that there's no moisture on it. Now, I'm gonna mix up hot water, and our hot water comes out screaming hot. You probably noticed that in this building, it's like boiling as it comes out, so you have to be very careful, but I do want really hot liver sulfur. So the hotter this is, the faster it works. Okay, so I see how much I poured in there, right? Okay, now, I'm gonna take my container, and again, making sure that my tongs are dry. Write that in your notes, okay? I'm gonna grab a little chunk, a little sliver. Look at that right there. See that? A little sliver. I think I may do one more. I just dropped it in there. I didn't even like get my tongs wet. And then immediately close this baby up, okay? And then I usually put it back in that cabinet over there. Now, what you're gonna see is gonna happen is that notice what's happening. The liver sulfur starts to dissolve, and this is going to reek too. This is going to smell really bad. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of stir that, and the heat will dissolve the pieces. Okay. All right. So we're getting there. We're getting close. We just need those to kind of dissolve out. If they don't dissolve out, if we lay our piece of metal in there and it contacts that chunk, it'll leave a super, super dark spot. And we want consistency, so we want those to dissolve. All right, now, this may be hard for you to see, so you may want to come over here, stand up just for a second, you can kind of watch as you see, okay? All right, so you've got a handout on liver sulfur. I recommend reading it, because it gives more details than what I'm going over in the demo. So what's going to happen here is we're going to place our samples. You notice I'm handling them by their edges now. Okay? If you really want to get like particular, use a pair of gloves. Okay? But we're going to handle by its edges, and I'm even going to be careful because even the remnants of what's on here can like make this black. Okay? So we'll put it in. Now watch what happens. Look at that. You see that? You see that happen? That color real quick? You see the purples that were on there for a second, for a split second? Look at that. Blues. See that? Now I'm going to go all the way dark. Now a lot of students say, hey, if a few seconds of this is good, I bet 2 hours is great. No. What happens is the patina gets really thick and chalky, and it flakes off. It actually starts to be removed. Now that's what we want. We want a very thin coating, not a thick coating. Now, we're going to come back over, and I'm going to put a little soap on this brass brush. This is particular. See, these are bristle, just black nylon bristles. These are brass bristles, okay? And we're going to take, see that little black splotch from where my tongs contacted? And again, I'm handling it by its edges. I'm going to take and lightly scrub this. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to lightly burnish the patina. It actually gives it a little sheen. And it's really gorgeous, and you can even turn on your water. I'm going to do cold water. You can neutralize the reaction of the patina with a little of baking soda and water if you want to stop it. I honestly could mix this a little diluted, right? A smaller chunk, and it would take longer, and you could achieve a whole range of colors, okay? Slowly, but mine's a little bit more concentrated, so it works quick. Okay, so we do that, and you notice I scrubbed it lightly. Now I'm going to go back in for another coat. See that happen again? See how it got black? And again, then we'll pull this out. We're getting some really cool like blues. Look at that. Across that. Now this patina works on copper. It does not work on brass, okay? Brass, it'll kind of antique a little bit, but it doesn't darken it. It just kind of makes it like a warm gold. It works great on bronze. Those of you that have done bronze casting, you may have used this before. It doesn't work on nickel. It works on sterling silver. Sterling silver, it gives you even more of a rainbow effect. So when we get done making our silver rings that we're going to make soon, you may decide in the end you don't want a silver ring. You actually want a kind of graphite, blackened, you know, colorful ring. So you can see we've got a pretty even finish there. I'm just going to rinse that soap off. And again, I was rubbing the back too to make sure that the back looks good. Then I'll put it back in for another coat. So here we go. Ready? See that? Turns real quick. And then I'm just going to try to get this last coat. Now you'll notice I want to try to brass brush 3 times. Okay, so 3 coats will build up 3 thin layers of liver of sulfur. And you notice I kind of like agitate this in the solution a little bit, as long as I'm not touching the face of it. And then the last rubbing, I'm going to go rub very lightly with my brass brush. I'm just looking for consistency in how I'm rubbing that, making sure there's no like dark splotches anywhere. Okay, now notice I'm handling by its edges again. I can come over and I can turn on this yellow lever right here. I can turn that on. Sulfur water, okay? And then we wind up with something that looks like that, all right? I'll pass it handle by the edges, okay? Let's do our other sample. See those colors? Whew, there we go. And you can say, oh, I like it light like that. Maybe I want to keep that, you know? It's your call. I'm going to go dark though. You could, yep, Or I'm going to show you that you can go dark and then rub it back lightly with another material. So we'll show you that in a second, okay? And then you decide, all right? The main thing I'm looking for though is consistency in the surface, okay? Is it consistent?
Is it going to stay that color? Like, will it wear over time?
It will stay this color. We're going to seal it in, yeah, We're going to seal it in with wax, and it will stay that way. And it might need another coat of wax over time, but yeah, the idea here is that we're basically trying to coat the metal before it gets, you know, tarnished, you know? So look at that, look at how that texture pops. Now some of you may do some texture where you're like, you run it through the rolling mill and you're like, oh, nothing happened. It's because you can't see it when it's raw copper, but when you patina a piece like those feather ones that we did, they're hard to see until you patina, and then also you're like, whoa, that looks so cool, you know? So, okay, so there's one coat. So again, don't let it sit in here for like, you know, a minute or 2 minutes. Like we just need to. again, read the handout. It talks about, you know, diluting it, using it, you know, stopping the reaction before it darkens too dark. You know, there's all sorts of kind of things you can do with liver sulfur. And later on, we'll talk about tumbling after the fact. We can do what's called tumbling the piece, and it'll give it even more of a sheen. It's gorgeous when you tumble after liver sulfur. Again, if you don't know what tumbling is yet, we'll talk about that later. But okay. It's basically like using a rock polisher with a stainless steel shot in it, and it rubs against there. But again, we'll show that another day. I don't mean to overwhelm you, but probably
Just dab the sulfur like 20 times. Just like
do what?
just dab the beef and sulfur like 20 times. So it's like ocean then.
Oh, you mean with what I'm doing there?
Yeah.
I'm not really counting a certain number. I'm just trying to agitate it so it gets even surface. Because sometimes in that container, like it may not, if it just sits there, if it's at the bottom, sometimes it doesn't like, it's not consistent. So there we go. Looks pretty good. Okay. So now let's go back to our bench. I'll draw this off. So go back to your, or go back